Hey guys, what's up? Unrested back, and please forgive my voice today, or if I cough while talking. I'm still getting over a cold. I feel great otherwise, no big problems. But I'm finally here to talk about something I spoke of in a recent video, and that is why moving to Japan might not be the best idea right now. I'm not saying give up totally on your dreams of ever moving to Japan. It's impossible. You'll never make it. The economy's falling apart. You'll never survive. I'm saying just right now is probably not the best time. You probably already know Japan's been in a recession for a pretty long time. We did have a little bit of a boost in the economy in 2023, but in the third quarter that's fallen again, so it really didn't make much of a difference. It was two steps forward, one step back sort of situation. The GDP, as far as Japan is concerned, when I moved there in 2007, it was the seventh strongest economy. I'm sorry, the second strongest economy in the world, and it dipped to the third strongest economy after China took over that secondary spot, and now it has dropped to the fourth strongest economy now that Germany has surpassed it. So it continues to dip lower and lower as far as GDP is concerned, and that is not a good thing when your country falls to fourth place in just 15 years. Doesn't sound like a lot of places, but it is when it comes to GDP. Unemployment is up. There is a real struggle for the youth to get full time employment that is significant enough to start their own family. A lot of the youth is breaking up their work time between multiple part time jobs, which leads to many problems. Number one, you don't get any of the benefits of working full time. You don't get any of the insurance coverage of working full time, and you never get like any kind of holiday pay or anything like that, or a salary. Just a lot of stuff kind of falls apart with how things are going. You've got the lower population going down farther and farther. By 2050, the population's supposed to be half of what it is now, and that means pretty much the whole government spending is going to go towards Social Security and never be reimbursed because there's not enough young workers there to reimburse it. It creates an even deeper hole. On top of it, there's little to no interest rate in Japan. You can't have any kind of savings that will accumulate interest because the Bank of Japan continues to pretty much print money and print bonds, and then they buy them back immediately, which completely flatlines any possibility of your country having any sort of interest. So I would say if you do earn money in Japan and you want to start a savings account, there is really no point in having a savings account in Japan. Move your money back over to wherever your home country is because they probably have a better savings situation than Japan. Especially if you're American, try to transfer your money on. I use TransferWise. I don't have any kind of benefit to telling you I use TransferWise. There's no sponsorship or anything like that. I'm not endorsed or anything. That's the easiest one to transfer money over to my American bank account from Japan. And I would suggest doing that if you earn anything and you want to make a little bit of interest on it. Just don't put it in a Japanese bank. There's no point. There's no such thing as savings. So let's really get into it. Let's dig deep into why it may not be the best idea to try to come over to Japan to start living. Now, I'm not saying don't come over to Japan at all. If you want to just come over like on a tourist visa, if you want to visit, if you want to taste the sights, the sounds, the culture, and stuff like that, I'm not telling you to avoid that. That's still going to be fun. If you have the money to come over to Japan and do that, do it. This is about trying to transfer your entire life to Japan. So, first off, jobs right now are not paying a lot. Unless you're coming over with the ability to speak fluent Japanese, you are regulated mostly to teaching jobs, teaching English. And those jobs are paying only around the equivalent to 2,000 American dollars right now. Nijuman en, Nijugoman en, about. That's that's not enough to live on, especially if you're in the city. And I know there's going to be the argument about, well, why don't I just live in the countryside? Well, then it doesn't pay Nijuman. It doesn't pay $2,000. It pays less. Probably looking at like $1,500, $1,700. Okay. If you're getting just even a simple place that is a one-room sort of walk-in closet, as I call them, you're looking at about $700 to $650 in rent and utilities minimum. Minimum. I'm trying to include as much as I can in that. And that's not including your your internet, your phone bill, your transportation. Okay, that's just like your rent and the utilities that you have to pay with your rent, like gas, electric, and water is usually what you have to pay in Japan. So, think about that. That's going to leave you with about what $350 of spending money per month. It's not a lot to survive on unless you just want to like stay at home and eat cup ramen every night. That's going to make it pretty hard to really enjoy Japan. There is no safety net for you unless you're coming to Japan with some sort of wealth already established or a secondary income. A lot of teachers I knew by the time I left were no longer just working one job. They were working their main 40-hour-a-week job and then having to have a ton of side hustles, such as teaching private lessons, working at cafes that wanted English speakers, working at like niche restaurants and stuff like that, where they're like, "Ooh, some of our staff speak to you in English. That's crazy, isn't it?" Doing stuff like that to make ends meet and just have enough spending money to do things other than stay at home by yourself alone eating cup ramen. You go to Japan, you want to enjoy the sights, the sounds, the clubs, the music, the dancing, the nightlife. Unless you're moving there with your family, which I would really not suggest trying to move there with an entire family. That would be, unless you already have some sort of really good established situation. I've had one friend I've seen move there with a family, and that's because, excuse me, that's because the dad already had a job that he could work remotely, and so he could work anywhere in the world, and he made decent cash. And well, especially if you're working for an American firm that is paying you in American cash, which is quite a bit in Japan, then there's no reason to be moving there and trying to find jobs for two people and take care of a kid and find a daycare. No, I would not suggest doing that. First of all, there's always limited daycare or youchien, hoikuen, which is like a kindergarten and daycare for kids. There's always limited space, even for the Japanese themselves. So trying to get your kid in there who is a foreigner would probably be a brutal struggle. I would not suggest trying to do that. Most likely one parent would probably have to be an at-home parent to take care of the kid. Especially if you try to come there like halfway through the year or something like that. You're not on the regular schedule as the Japanese. I do not envy that situation. Also, like I said, some people might say, well, hey, Scott, like, what if I go ahead and move to the countryside and I'm still able to go out to the city, I'll take the train out to the city, I'll make a city income, and I'll live in the countryside, and maybe that'll be a good exchange rate as far as I'm getting enough money to not blow everything on rent and have some free time money. Well, okay, you've got a point there. That's a good point. What are you going to do in the countryside? I don't know if you've ever really been to the Japanese countryside, but it's like all or nothing when it comes to Japan. You get out to the city, there's a ton of stuff to do. You got, karaoke, you got clubs, music, dancing, nightlife, shopping, all kinds of fun stuff to do. When you live in the countryside, there's like literally nothing. You've got like a vending machine in a rice field, and maybe if you're lucky, a quickie mart nearby. And that's about it. Like it's really sparsely populated and sparsely residential when you get to the countryside. There's literally nothing to do. Even in areas where it's kind of like suburban, it's mostly just houses everywhere. And unless you're going to have a lot of friends that live in the same area and you're going to visit their houses together, there's no reason to be living out there if you want to really experience the true Japanese culture and all the different things it has to offer. You will probably learn Japanese faster because no one out there will speak even a word of English. But you really got to question that. The people I have seen give up and move home the fastest are the ones who were regulated to the countryside. So, for example, when they came to Japan, their English company or whatever company they came with put them in the middle of the countryside. They could not take it. Unless you're coming over speaking fluent Japanese, which in that case you might be okay, it is really, really lonely in the Japanese countryside. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The Japanese are super friendly. You could probably make some very friendly neighbors, but it's hopelessly lonely in the Japanese countryside. I've heard that from multiple people. I've lived out there a little bit myself. I've taken trips out there, and it can be bleak. It can be bleak. That's all I'm saying. I mean, maybe some people, like if you were super super introverted, you'd be okay. But then if you're also introverted, I don't know how you're also working a English teaching job where you've got to constantly be on the ball as far as conversation is concerned. So, what a catch-22, right? Um, Taxes keep climbing. When I first got to Japan, there wasn't any kind of taxes on food at all. By the time I left Japan, there's 10% tax on food, and it just keeps climbing. I have heard that it's going to continue to climb nonstop every year. Is that true or not? I don't know. I'm not really a big numbers and economics guy. But it did seem like that was happening because by the time I left, it was 10% on food. This slowly nickels and dimes you down to a point where you're like really shocked at how your grocery bill is climbing. I would say eating out in Japan is cheaper than eating out in America for sure. So that's kind of nice. And you don't need to tip. So that's kind of nice too. But how often are you eating out every night? Unless you're going to be eating out every single night of the week, which is also going to take a huge stab at your budget, unless you're eating at like the cheapest podunk places ever. Um, you are going to chip away quite a bit at your spending just because of taxes or eating out. Um, the other big problem is people may say, well, I'll come over there and start as a teacher, but I'll work my way up until I'm like a manager or something like that. Like I'll get higher pay eventually. And it's like, no, actually, you probably won't. Japanese people themselves haven't been getting raises or increases in salary for the last 30 years. It is very uncommon unless you've been with a company for ages, and I'm talking like 15 to 20 to 25 years, that you would have a significant increase in your income as a Japanese person. So that means you as a gaijin are not getting increases at all. As a gaijin, there's two things you do not get. You usually get no increase in your salary at all as a teacher, and you usually don't get the Christmas and summer bonus that the Japanese usually get. Why is that? Because you're gaijin? I don't know what to tell you. Because you're a foreigner? Because you don't get granted the same benefits that the Japanese do, and they can do that, and you're on a yearly contract? That's another scary thing you got to remember about. If you're a Japanese person, it's very difficult to get fired from your job. To the point that even if you're super bad at your job, they'll just keep moving you around to different departments and keep you doing busy work just to keep you in the system, because they'd rather deal with you in the system rather than deal with a possible lawsuit or paying unemployment for firing you. They'll just lose money doing it that way. Whereas a gaijin, they can fire you at any time, any moment, and usually your contract is only for a year, and I've even heard of contracts that are only for 3 to 6 months as well. All my contracts were 1-year contracts. I never got longer than a 1-year contract at any job I ever worked at. Did I ever get salary increases? I would, but they would be like so measly. It would be like, okay, you're getting paid 25 an hour. We're gonna do $25.25 an hour next year, and you're like, oh yay, wow, that'll really keep me smiling all the way to the bank. Let me have at it. The thing that always got me was, um, I was in charge of always getting new students to join the school, and I never even got a kickback whenever people would pay those initiation fees or join the school. And I was like the first person they had to come to. They would drop their kid off and come to the demo class, and I did all the demo classes, and it was really dependent on me whether or not they joined. And let me tell you, I got really good at those demo classes. Like, kids would join nonstop. I worked one school where it started out with 8 students in their preschool class, and they had 24 by the time I finally quit. And the reason I finally quit was because I was told eventually I would be given a kickback from getting people to start. And after 2 years, that kickback never kicked in. I never got paid that. And when I questioned the owner of the school about it, they're just like, yeah, well, I mean, we're just a small independent school. We're not a big name school. And it's like, yeah, but you promised me this when I started. So, um, let's see. Let's go into the next one. Okay, so the other reason I'd say we've got, your economic situation kind of hard to survive right now. Jobs are not paying enough. And the crazy thing, here's the crazy thing. When I first got to Japan in like 2007, it was pretty easy to find a job that would pay $3,000 a month. $3,000 a month was pretty easy to live off of. My first job paid 3,300 a month. And I was living life large. The only problem was I was teaching nighttime lessons that were like brutal. Like I was teaching from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. and I'd have to sleep during the day. And Japan is not easy to sleep during the day. It is very loud. So that job was like killing me, dude. I did eventually find another job that paid 3,000, but by the time I left, every job I was searching for, because I was trying to earn a little extra money because I didn't have as many students at the school I had started, was only paying 2,000. And that was in Osaka, which is like a really well-to-do city urban life area where people know the rent is very high, anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month for even a very tiny place. And no one was paying any kind of survivable fee. Like, I don't know how they expected to hire anybody. It was depressing. One of the main reasons I did leave. Um, Post Olympics and post COVID has changed the mood. I would say when I first got to Japan in 2007, and this could just be a perception thing on my part, so take this with a pinch of salt, all right? Like, this is a very subjective opinion. When I first got to Japan in 2007, I really felt this sort of upbeat, go get 'em attitude. The Japanese were hustling, they were busybodies, they had hard lives where they would work 12 hours a day, but they still seemed very genki and very energetic, that the future was bright, that they could get salary lifts, that they could make their way in the corporate world. And by the time I left after the Olympics had completely failed, they'd completely bombed out. Japan didn't make any money from that. It completely destroyed their economy. Kyoto had gone bankrupt because they had lost any kind of foreigners visiting, and all their market was based on foreigners visiting. And COVID had pretty much ruined the economy. The Japanese people didn't have that same bright, happy, go get 'em attitude. And look, I'm not I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying, oh, come on, guys, keep a stiff upper lip. Yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They'd just been through a rough situation. COVID was not pretty in Japan. A lot of people died. Even some big stars died in Japan. It was not a pretty situation because there's a ton of old people in Japan, so it really took a toll on Japan. So I'm not saying like, come on, guys, what are you not as dinky as before? Or what's going on? They had every right to be kind of grim and downtrodden and feeling pretty rough about the situation, and that wears on you too. That reflects back on you too. Um, you're not greeted with as many smiles. You're not able to have upbeat, cheery conversations. You're not feeling the same sort of energy and vibe at work when you go to work, where everybody's, even though they're working very hard, they're still very animated, peppy, and polite all the time. Things are just kind of quiet and silent, and crickets chirping in the background type of situation, needle coming off the record type of situation, where it's just feeling kind of dismal and grim and gray. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not putting this on the Japanese culture. They are extremely emotionally tough people who can make it through a lot of hardships. But they had just been through one of their biggest with COVID and the Olympics failing. And so, it took a toll on the overall atmosphere of Japan. they're still recovering from that, and rightfully so. They need their time to recover. So that's another reason, though, you might want to wait till the whole economy, the whole atmosphere, the whole aura around the workplace is able to recuperate from that. It's like, your friend just had a death in the family. You're not going to be like, come on, let's get out of the house and have the best time ever, woohoo! All right, you want to let them have their mourning time. You want to let them take things at their own pace for a little bit. That's kind of the situation I'm saying you should let Japan have too before you decide to come over there for a job. I will also say that this kind of dipped the excitability for English. That's because they were super excited about English when the Olympics were coming. They needed to have people learn English ASAP. They themselves knew they were going to have a lot of foreigners in Japan, and were excited to learn English to be able to speak to these people who were coming to visit their amazing country so they could talk about it. That's all gone. That's all. Nobody's super excited about English anymore. And again, rightfully so, okay? I understand why. They're not excited about Gaijin because there's the whole sort of, and when I say Gaijin, if you don't know the word, it just means foreigner. They're not super excited about foreigners coming because there was scares for a while, which I know some people might bring racism and stuff into this. I can understand another culture being scared about visitors bringing a different strain of COVID over. So there was sort of a xenophobic air. There is a sort of animosity because recently there was a lot of idiotic streamers doing idiotic stuff in the street that were Gaijin. So that's not as good for how you're going to be greeted and taken in the atmosphere around you as a foreigner in Japan. So there's some things Japan needs to recover from right now to kind of get their pep back. That's all I'm saying, okay? Unemployment is higher in Japan right now. A lot of people struggling to find decent work in Japan, and that also makes the mood more grim. A lot of my friends that were Japanese had lost their jobs during COVID, still couldn't get them back, and we were not hanging out because their whole life was working a job to find a job, pretty much. And that does not make people want to go out and have fun, of course. So, I know a lot of people, they're probably going to be like, okay, you're telling me teaching is not the way to go right now to get to Japan, but let me ask you if I could go there to get some sort of tech job or entertainment job or some job outside of teaching. For that, I would also practice some restraint unless you know you're going to get into a very niche situation in which they desperately only need a foreigner to do it, such as localization or something like that. Because right now you are dealing with a competitive market even with Japanese people trying to get really good full-time employment. The other thing someone might say is, well, what about going there to start my own company? And it's like, unless you are coming to Japan with a ton of money, and I'm talking like enough to buy a house in America. If you're coming to Japan with that kind of money, yeah, you could probably start your own business. You could buy yourself a nice little place and get something started. But if you're just there and you're like, I'm going to work my way up until I have enough to start my own company, or I'm going to just come over there with a couple thousand in my wallet and see what I can do to get something small started, I really don't suggest doing that. Luxuries are at a minimum right now in Japan, and a lot of what foreigners bring to Japan is luxuries. So, for example, teaching English is a luxury. You do not need to speak English to get a job in Japan, so people are not spending a lot of money on English. If you're some sort of artist who has some sort of unique art, maybe you make jewelry or something like that, that is a luxury. People are not spending a lot on luxuries right now, so I would stay away from that. If you're coming there with some sort of like really creative financial situation that you know is going to help people make money or something like that, something that would help the economy, maybe there is some sort of business endeavor that would be a unique venture that Japanese people would be excited about, but I'm not the person to talk to about that. I have no idea what that would be. But let's end the video on a more positive note. I want to get into a more positive thing. And I've been taking notes the whole time, like writing down what I can say to balance this video out, because I did not want to end on a bummer of do not come to Japan, all your dreams are dead. First of all, I want to reiterate one more time, this is a temporary situation. This is not how Japan's going to be forever. The economy is going to eventually lift. Teaching jobs are going to be needed again. They are eventually going to balance out where they pay enough, because eventually if you lose too many teachers, and let me tell you, Japan is losing a ton of English teachers right now, they're eventually going to have to raise the salary so they can get some back. I will say the things that would be the best reason to come to Japan right now is, number one, schooling. You want to come to Japan and learn the language. Do it. It's not any more expensive or any less expensive than it was probably 15 years ago. You want to come there and live in a dorm or rent a small apartment because you have a scholarship money, or you've been saving to just live in Japan for a little bit and learn the language, do it. That'll be great. That'll be awesome. It might even open up some job opportunities that are unavailable to those who can't learn to speak perfect Japanese. Studying a martial art. I have a friend who stays on a visa in which he just learns Aikido all the time. He's retired military. He lives on visas that are based on martial arts, and he studies there every day doing Aikido. Come to Japan and do that. That's another unique venture. Tourist visa. Just come there for 3 months and enjoy like I said, the sights, the sounds, the food, the people, the culture, the beauty, the art, everything. There's no time where that is not okay to do, unless there's like been some major disaster. I'd say any time is good in Japan to come and do that. I might advise against not doing it in the summer, because Japan is blazing hot, like outrageously insane hot in the summer. So like just think about that. Unless you're going to Hokkaido, just realize you're going to be cooked. Okay, you're going to be really blazing hot. And the last but not least, work exchange visa. You want to work in a coffee shop for a little bit. I think they give you 3 months on your visa. If you're like Australian or Canadian, you can do that. Sorry, America, we cannot. We do not have any kind of work exchange visa with Japan. So that's another thing. You'd still need to come over there with a little bit of savings to survive. You're probably not going to make enough in your job to pay for a life there for long. You might be able to, rent some temporary stuff. I think they still have the work farm visa too, where you can like work on a farm for 3 months, and you'll usually stay at the house of the farmer. Which, man, that is going to be some rural stuff, and you're going to learn some really deep country Japanese, but it would be quite an experience. I've always wanted to do that one myself. Anyway, that is my take on why you should not come to Japan right now. Again, please take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is a very subjective opinion, and I think you should listen to more than just me about this situation. There's always those videos out there, I always think they're so goofy, where they're like, why you might not like living in Japan. Small food portions, sizes that don't fit. You can always buy enough food to eat if you think the food portions are too small. If things don't fit properly, there's Amazon, so I don't understand how people wouldn't move to Japan because they can't find shoes or a helmet or something like that doesn't fit. Just use Amazon. Everybody uses Amazon. Don't let those silly reasons guide you away from visiting Japan. There's the other one about loneliness, but I think that really only goes for like living long term in Japan. People will be lonely in Japan. You learn to deal with it, you adapt, and you eventually become accepted. So don't let that stop you either. I'm sure there's other aspects of this I've missed out on, and more questions you have. Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to answer those, and I hope I've filled you in on why you shouldn't come to Japan right now to teach. Until next time, I've been Unrested, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.